Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be talking about the astrology of the second half of June 2026. If you're wondering where the first half of June is, that is in a separate video. I'll put the link for that below. I had the idea because I was changing and streamlining my forecasting. I had the idea of splitting the months ahead into two videos and posting those across the month. But I kind of feel that in practice that hasn't really worked. So sorry to chop and change. Sometimes you just have to try things and see how they work out. It didn't really work to do it that way. So next month we'll just go back to doing the month ahead forecast. So here we are now in the second half of the month. So I'm going from the 16th of June to the end of June. And we are headed now into a very big period. I did point this out in my year ahead forecast, so I'll link that below as well if you want to check in with that again. So we're basically coming to a time where there's an enormous amount of tension in the skies and some very major movements are happening. Chiron and Jupiter are changing signs over the next couple of weeks, and they're also going to be in aspect with one another, having a conversation with one another. So it's signaling some longer term changes and starting to bring in some new stories. And that's actually where we begin. On the 19th of June, Chiron will enter Taurus. This is a preview because Chiron will re-enter Aries on the 18th of September this year, 2026, until the 14th of April, 2027. And that is when Chiron will move into Taurus properly for the long haul, and it'll be there right up until the 19th of July 2033. That's when it starts to move out of Taurus. There'll be a little bit of in and out as it starts to make its way into Gemini. But basically, once we get to April 2027, we're then in for 6 years of Chiron being in Taurus. So where Chiron moves, he talks about healing. He is the wounded healer. He was half man, half horse, a centaur, but he was different from the other centaurs because he had more of a human body. So he had the full body of a man, but then the back half of him was the body of a horse. So his front legs were human, back legs was a horse's. And so just that extra human element was meant to represent his intelligence and his ability to be logical and rise above his animal instincts, but still, of course, very connected to his animal self. The animal self is not a bad thing. It's the part of us that is instinctual and receives information in different ways, a part of us that needs to be close to the earth. And here we have Chiron moving into Taurus, the first of the earth signs. So that straight away puts us in a situation collectively where healing the earth is going to be a very important story going forwards. We already know, of course, that we have issues with global warming. Those issues are going to be more prominent as Neptune and Saturn make their way through Aries. So we're going to be having conversations with Chiron in Taurus about our food, our agriculture, because these are also Taurus. We're going to be talking a lot about what matters and consumption, because we consume in Taurus. We want to have things in Taurus. Taurus is our possessions. It's our money, of course. We think about money here because we want to survive. That's also Taurus. I want to survive. And I don't just want to survive, I want to thrive. I want to blossom. Venus is the ruler of Taurus. I want to blossom. I want fruits and vegetables and all the good things, the pleasurable, lovely things. And Chiron is coming along and saying, okay, but the core values here might need to change because there is some kind of sickness with our consumption. There is some kind of sickness here because maybe personally in our own charts, we've shifted away from what actually matters. And Chiron's going to take us back to where have you been hurt here? It can be physical wounds, but more often it's emotional, spiritual wounds. We have something here that is a vulnerability wherever Chiron is moving. He says healing is required here so you can bring everything together and be yourself. Often because of the story of rejection, we can reject ourselves. We can reject parts of ourselves, especially when we feel hurt and vulnerable. We can hide ourselves. Chiron went off to live in a cave, so we can hide ourselves to sort of lick our wounds, metaphorically speaking, and then we're not using the best of ourselves because through Chiron's teachings and through our suffering, we come to find these special skills. He unlocks us in a way that allows us to bring the very best of everything we've learned and to help other people. Now, it might be literally that we become a nurse or a carer, or we do something in our community that is healing, helpful, or it might be more just in our day-to-day lives that our experience of hurt and pain and wounding and overcoming those things to live a life where we can still appreciate the simple pleasures of life, Taurus. That can be a very precious gift to be able to give to others, to help others to appreciate, to have gratitude, to bring a smile to someone's face. It's the simple things that matter, says Chiron in Taurus, and that's what he's going to be teaching us about. I'm going to be doing a lot more on Chiron in Taurus. Chiron is one of my favorites. I have a special affection for Chiron. So I'm going to be talking a lot more. Chiron's actually going to be conjoining my sun as he hits that 0 degrees of Taurus. So no doubt I'll have some stories to tell you going forwards. But that just gives you a little flavor of some of the things we might be dealing with. I also meant to say in the outer world sort of collective story, I mentioned food and agricultural systems. Sometimes Chiron in Taurus in the past has been associated with famine, problems about food production. So I'm just kind of flagging that up, given that we are in a situation right now where there's a problem with the movement of oil because of the Iran war, which is affecting fertilizer. So we'll see how that works going forward. So I just wanted to mention that because I think that could be an important story with Chiron in Taurus. So on the 21st of June, the sun will enter Cancer. So this is the turning of the wheel of the year here in the northern hemisphere. It is the summer solstice. In the southern hemisphere, it is the winter solstice. Either way, the focus is on the sun, who, astrologically speaking, is the creator. It brings us light without which we could not live. So it's an important moment, and these ingresses into the cardinal signs, the charts of the moment, can give us a hint about the next quarter between now and autumn equinox. So I'm interested in the fact that as the sun goes into Cancer, it is, of course, going to be squaring Neptune. And it's also in a dissociated square with the moon. So dissociated just means that a proper square, so involving the signs, the sign that is square from Cancer is Libra. And we are indeed heading towards a first quarter moon. But using the orbs we use in astrology, in other words, we give the planets a little bit of leeway, and the lights, we give them a little bit of leeway. And so the moon is just starting to square the sun from Virgo. So it's a little weaker, but it's still there. And I think it's important that we note it, because the sign Virgo, yes, it's connected to health and healing and details and daily life, and being very kind of focused on how do we fix things, how do we make life better, the idea of serving and doing our best. But it's also a sign that can be associated with the services and the military. And so with the emphasis, with the light being on Cancer, home, homeland and family, then clearly there is some kind of tension here. Sometimes the moon in mundane astrology can just symbolize the people and feeling out of step with what the leaders are doing. So the sun can symbolize those who are kind of in charge because they are the ones who shine, kind of thing, on the world stage, the big players. So there's some of that. It might simply be that we feel like we're all very focused on the small things that make the difference in our day-to-day lives, like the cost of living. Hello, Chiron, just going into Taurus. The sun is actually in a sextile to Chiron. So we have an invitation here collectively to work on, again, healing the motherland, healing what is beneath our feet, and shifting and changing what we value so that we have more light in our lives, so that we feel better on a day-to-day basis. But there are things going on in the world that are distracting Neptune, the square to Neptune. So we have a lot of distractions. We have a lot of unknowns in play. We don't really know what's the truth, what's fiction. We are feeling very overwhelmed, sometimes feeling very, very helpless with the sun in a square to Neptune. That can really distort how we see everything. The moon and sun can be like the eyes. So it feels like for the next quarter then, we're still in a situation where we don't quite know what is happening, that there is still a problem in the ocean because of Neptune in Aries fighting over the waters, and the issue with oil. Neptune also represents oil. So we still have some ongoing stories here that have been in play now for a while, and the sun's ingress into Cancer is going to flag these up once again. On the 28th of June, now as we come towards the end of this month, we are starting to ramp the tension up. It begins with a sextile. So normally, of course, the sextile is an invitation to work constructively. It is still an invitation to work constructively, but Mars and Jupiter, the two planets creating a sextile with one another, they are both on the anaretic degrees of their signs. Jupiter tends to magnify things anyway. Mars tends to get super frustrated in Taurus. Don't forget, this is the sign where it struggles to work because the opposite sign is where Mars likes to be. In Scorpio, that's the sign that it co-rules. So it's in a place that it doesn't really like, because Taurus likes to move very slowly and Mars likes to move quickly. So now we're getting this screaming urgency with Mars at 29 Taurus, huge frustration over, again, resources and security. We want to sort this out. We want to get something done immediately to resolve this. There's a big opportunity, says Jupiter, and Jupiter in Cancer is wanting to feel safe. So there's some big story about massive resources. It could even be something to do with these mineral deals. I don't know whether it's connected with Ukraine. There's things going on with Greenland, I guess Iran as well. So I don't know, maybe there's something coming from this. But all I feel is that even though it's a sextile, sort of collectively, the big story is that there's some kind of desire to take quick, big action that's going to have an impact. And then Mars goes into Gemini, and that's when all of the Gemini story kicks off, because it's going to immediately enter into a conjunction with Uranus. I mean, even at 29 Taurus, Mars is in a conjunction with Uranus and Sedna as well. So as soon as it gets to this point, we're starting to see this activity going on in Gemini. The big story that's happening in Gemini is about upgrading in some way our communications. And it's an awakening. It's a rapid change of mindset, but it could also be a split in brothers, we could say, with the sign of the twins. There could be a big argument with Mars conjunct Uranus. The actual conjunction, by the way, is on the 4th of July between Mars and Uranus. So we'll talk more about that in the next part. But I just wanted to make you aware that as soon as Mars goes into Gemini, it's already engaging very strongly with Uranus. And the pace once again picks up to the point of, it's almost like I'm getting sort of images from cartoons as a child, where you're watching the legs of Tom and Jerry, for example, or Pink Panther. You know, you're watching their legs going round and round and round. Oh, what's a better one? Roadrunner. I used to love that cartoon so much. So yes, watching the Roadrunner's legs speeding so fast that they are a blur. That is what Mars going into Gemini feels like, especially when it's heading towards a conjunction with Uranus. It's like everything is just moving at such a pace here, including sometimes the mind and how we speak to others, how we communicate with others. And when Mars goes into Gemini, it's going to be there, by the way, until the 11th of August. When Mars goes into Gemini, our words can become weapons. That's the thing that we need to be mindful about. We can say things without thinking. We can just let the words pop right out of our mouth before we've filtered them. And that can cause conflicts, that can cause problems. Now, positively, being more direct, being a little more assertive in how we speak about the things that matter to us, how we present our ideas, it might give us some confidence. If you've got an interview or a presentation to do, Mars and Gemini can be really useful. It can be really good for thinking on your feet as well. Improvisation is very good for Mars near to Uranus, because Uranus is like, let's just see what happens. So it can be really great for that. But it can also mean that mentally the mind is in overdrive, and we are almost like, again, using the mind like a weapon, so we can turn in on ourselves. We're internally arguing with ourselves. And I just want to point out as well that I'm going to jump ahead here, but on the 30th of June, Mars will then square the nodes, which is basically activating Uranus square the nodes, which I talked about in the first half of June. So we've got a big story here about some kind of conflict, Mars, or a desire to win a competition, some kind of goal that is revolutionary, we could say, with Uranus, that is focused on the idea of freedom, liberation, some kind of action here that is trying to push us past where we have been very stuck. The problem is that we can get impatient with Mars, and again, that feeling of not looking before we leap. So frying pan fire type of scenario. But positively, Mars square to the nodes could give us the courage we need to break free, especially in our own chart. So look at where Mars is traveling in Gemini in your own chart, because that's the area of life, the house, that's the area of life where a careful, well thought through move of some kind, an action, will help to get you unstuck in your Virgo house and push you towards evolving in your Pisces house. This is how these aspects can work for us. And it'll just kind of ring the bell of any Uranus transits that you're experiencing as well. And that could also help to awaken you to what needs to change for the long term. But with all of this squaring the nodes stuff happening, it does feel that we are at some kind of impasse that is based around a decision that's connected with conflict. This is in the wider community. So Mars goes into Gemini, 28th of June. That square to the nodes is on the 30th of June. On the 29th of June, Mercury will station retrograde. And so this is why we need to be very careful about the action that we take. That's why I labored the point of a mindful action, a careful, well thought out action, Mars squaring the nodes from Gemini, because Mercury is currently Mars's dispositor. It's also Uranus's dispositor. Mercury rules Gemini, so it's kind of the one that Uranus and Mars look to for a bit of direction whilst they are playing in his house. So now we have Mercury stationing retrograde. What does that mean? It means that if you start something around this time, like a conflict, an argument, then it could have unintended consequences. It could take things back a step. It could take things back to a situation that we really wanted to avoid. So traditionally, it's usually not a good idea to start an argument or start something when Mercury is going retrograde. So this is why we need to make sure that we're giving a lot of room for, how might my feelings be informing my thinking process here, because Mercury is in Cancer. Cancer is a sign that's associated with our emotions, our instincts, and it's there in the conjunction with anoretic, urgent, critical Jupiter now at the end of Cancer. Yes, Jupiter loves to be in the sign Cancer, but again, it can magnify things. So we've got that urgent desire to feel safe and connected and feel like we have somewhere we belong and to just feel safe at home. And that is filtering through everything, the way we think and what we're deciding and what we're communicating, how we're seeing things, how we're conceiving of things. And that is affecting what we decide. I will have a lot more to say about the Mercury retrograde, so there'll be more coming on this soon. But generally just look at your Cancer house. The degrees that are going to be covered here, it's going to station at 26 degrees of Cancer and 13 minutes. And it will go back to 16 degrees and 18 minutes of Cancer, stationing direct on the 23rd of July, clearing the shadow zone by the 7th of August. So we have a period of time here which involves a review. That's always what Mercury is doing. He's taking us inwards so that we can review specifically how we feel in our Cancer house and how we're doing with our sense of feeling connected and like we belong, like we feel at home here. These are the questions that will come up in our personal charts. On the same day as Mercury stations retrograde, we will also have a full moon in Capricorn. Now, actually, in the UK, it's happening very, very late, just 4 minutes to midnight. So for some of you who are ahead of us in the UK, it might actually be the 30th of June. It certainly is very close to this Mercury retrograde, and Mercury will still be stationary in this chart. And I will, as always, be doing a deep dive into this chart, looking at all the aspects and the Sabian symbol and the asteroids that are connected to this lunation. If you want to hear that, then come over to my Substack. It is a premium post for paying members. But generally speaking, the full moon in Capricorn is a time where we are illuminating the tensions or the difficulties between what is required of us from the outer world. So this is Capricorn. Capricorn can speak of our responsibilities and commitments to the wider world, how we contribute. It's typically our work and our business. And then the sun still there in Cancer is connected to the idea of, again, home and family and who we are away from the world. And both of the lights are square to Neptune. So again, we have some sense of, I feel a little lost. Where am I in all of this? Between my work and my family, I don't know where I am. So this is going to be one of the really big stories of this full moon in Capricorn. And it's going to raise this issue of, what can I commit to? What do I need to be working on? Where do I need to be super practical? Because Capricorn is very practical and responsible. But there are also still some other questions to address. Finding the meaning in all these responsibilities, and at the same time recognizing, or at least just acknowledging, that with Mercury retrograde, we might not have all the answers just yet. So sometimes we yet again have to just sit with the feelings to figure this out. And then finally, on June the 30th, Jupiter will enter Leo. And again, I'm going to be doing a separate piece on this transit. It's important though, because not least because the minute that Jupiter goes into Leo, it is squaring Chiron. The actual square will be in a couple of days' time. And it's going to be opposing Pluto. That opposition will be exact on the 20th of July, and it's going to be in play up until the 14th of August. So there are big things happening here, massive tensions. Pluto is also a desire for control. So we have the potential for somebody taking a big risk. Jupiter in Leo. Leo is associated with risk-taking and gambling. Somebody taking a big risk to massively take control, Pluto, of our waning resources, Chiron in Taurus. So I think there are very strong implications for things happening out in the wider world that are connected to the conflicts that we know well at this point in time, especially with Mercury retrograde, with the emphasis on Uranus and Mars squaring the nodal axis, this big split, this fight between neighbors, even with Mars in Gemini. That's the shadow expression, which again can be connected with this idea of a desire to be free in some way. So I think we just need to, again, be mindful, watch this pattern, because it's super, super dynamic. And in our own lives, there's a similar but not quite so extreme story, hopefully not so extreme. The problem is Jupiter and Pluto, they do tend to go to extremes because Pluto can speak of extremes. You know, Pluto rules the lower world. Jupiter rules the upper world. They've got these magnifying glasses that make everything bigger. So Pluto can really bring out the extremism. Of course, Jupiter can be about faith as well. So we have some stories about, righteous action perhaps going on here too. But what I was trying to say is in our own charts, We just need to look at where's Jupiter traveling. Here is the potential for something really good to happen, for great developments to happen, for getting a bit more confident, for taking some calculated risks. That could be good for us with Jupiter going into Leo. But to do that, to get the benefits that Jupiter promises, we're going to have to confront opposition. Pluto, our fears in our Pluto house. Wherever Pluto is traveling in Aquarius, we're going to need to challenge ourselves there. Maybe we need to get rid of something here, or we need to take control here in a positive way. Or we just need to face a fear here. Something here needs to be transformed. And Jupiter's going to massively magnify that and say, look, if you do that thing over there, if you do that thing in your Pluto house, where Pluto is traveling right now, then something good can come from this. And it's likely to help us to feel better ultimately, because they're both squaring Chiron. So again, I will be speaking more about this as we go into July, but it's important that we mention it now because it's already in play. The minute Jupiter goes into Leo, it is activating this hugely dynamic pattern. And so the general idea, wherever Jupiter moves, this is how we get our joy. This is where we are feeling like there's an opportunity for development, that we feel luckier here. And as I said, Leo energy, it's super creative. It's very playful. It's encouraging us to be more playful, to come out from hiding at home. Yes, Jupiter in Cancer loves to be at home, but we need to come out and enjoy other things in the world. It can help us develop our creativity, because this is a sign that's associated with creative self-expression. It's ruled by the sun, but in shadow for that reason. Then Jupiter in Leo can also speak of arrogance and the kind of leaders who want far too much attention and who want to be treated like a god or a king. This is the problem with Leo in shadow. It can be very arrogant and filled with pride. And again, Jupiter magnifies what it touches. So there could be instances of sort of somebody who is very proud out there on the world stage, who may get a downfall with that opposition to Pluto, but may react in kind and try to keep hold of the power in some way. So we will see how this story unfolds. But certainly in our own charts, there are lots of possibilities for Jupiter to manifest in positive ways. I think the issue we mostly have with Jupiter and its promises is that we often just kind of sit there and wait for Jupiter to dump, a lottery win in our lap. And it would be so nice if that happened, of course. But it's not always the way that it happens, and it's not often the way that it happens with Jupiter. The key to getting the benefits of Jupiter is being willing to grow. It's being willing to develop our understanding of ourselves wherever he moves. And it's about having faith and believing that things are possible, that developments are possible wherever he moves. So we have to kind of do a little work and pay a little homage to Jupiter to get the gifts that he offers, rather than just going, oh well, Jupiter's going into my second house, so I'm going to be made of money for the next year. It can actually mean that sometimes you end up spending more. So this is where we have to be careful that we don't overemphasize how wonderful Jupiter can be. But at the same time, we don't want to diminish the possibilities that he can really bring us some light, especially when he's going through Leo. So Jupiter will be in Leo from the 30th of June 2026 to the 26th of July 2027. So this brings me to the end of this reading. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do click a like and subscribe. It always helps the algorithm. If you would like to hear more from me, I do have a website, a Substack. I'm also on social media. All those links you can find below. I will see you again soon. And in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.